Hello, my name is Rachel Pinder, and I am the Assistant Director of Disability Services at the University of North Georgia.
I am Joe Funderburk, and I'm a coordinator of Student Disability Services with the University of North Georgia.
And we want to talk to you today about accommodations at the post-secondary level. A little bit about University of North Georgia to begin with. We have 6 campuses now. Our online campus is growing, but we have degrees from associate degrees all the way up to higher level graduate degrees. Let's talk about the difference between high school and college. As a lot of you are probably familiar with, high school looks very similar to this, right? Classes meet daily, attendance is mandated, a lot of the work gets done in the classroom with the teacher. Teachers and paraprofessionals prompt students about their grades. Class time is devoted to answering questions, a lot of activities in the classroom, and parents and teachers are responsible for guiding students through setting priorities. But in college, things look different, and classes may meet 2 or 3 times a week. Attendance is students' responsibility, and you accept the consequences of non-attendance. Students in college are treated as adults. They are 18 plus. They are free to make their own choices in terms of attendance. Most work is done outside of class, and there will be substantial amounts of reading and writing in college. So, I mean, in college, a lot of responsibilities on the student to read chapters before the class, to write papers. All those assignments are done outside of the class. And in many classes, students go to class to hear the lecture. Students monitor their own grades. Disability Services does not monitor grades. There's no service on campus that's going to monitor grades for the student. That is, again, their responsibility. Class time is devoted to presenting new materials and lectures. As I was saying, a lot of professors, their classes are lecture-based or PowerPoint-based. So the student may have an assignment to read the first 3 chapters and then come to class where the professor is going to look or is going to lecture about it. And students are responsible for what they do and do not do and accept the consequences of their decisions. Again, we are talking about adults who are 18 plus and are free to make choices. So those are some slides that we usually start with for our Foundations for Success, our Student Disability Services orientation. I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of what college is going to look like. Now, let's talk about admissions. Admissions to the university. Before starting college, right, it's important for students to understand their accommodations and become comfortable talking about them. Right, at the high school level, hopefully in those IEPs or 504 meetings, the student is speaking up and self-advocating for themselves, because they're going to need those skills when they come over to see us. And also encourage students to sign up with Student Disability Services as soon as possible after getting their acceptance letter. Important thing to note, right? Do not send your IEPs or your 504 plans in with your admissions packet. That information about eligibility for accommodations should not be a criteria when the team is deciding which students to accept. So, first step is get yourself accepted to the institution of your choice. Then you want to register for disability services. More on admissions. As I was saying, a disability is not considered for admissions to any public university. They're not going to ask you questions on the admissions applications, and that is not the place to disclose. Documentation of an academic barrier should not be included with your admissions transcripts, immunization records. Disability services is separate from the admissions department, and our information is kept confidential. So, after you get your acceptance letter to UNG, how do you go about setting up accommodations? This is at University of North Georgia's Disability Services webpage. How do you register for services? On the website, our intake packet is step 1. You submit your documentation on step 2, and then we'll give you a call to set up a meeting to finish up the registration. And if you're curious about guidelines for documentation, other things that you should submit other than the IEP or the 504 plan, you can take a look at the guidelines of what the information needs to have in order to qualify for accommodations. But that'll come later, but that is where you register for disability. That's where you register for accommodations after you receive your acceptance letter. Confidentiality, as I was saying, all records are kept confidential and information is not shared without permission. We are talking about adults 18 plus who are free to make choices. We need their written consent to share information with parents, with siblings, with other departments at the University of North Georgia, with doctors. We need students' written consent before we can disclose any information. Also important to note, transcripts, your academic transcripts will never ever say anything about the accommodation. So if you get extra time on tests, that's never going to appear on your academic transcript. And as I was saying, students consent or release for the university to share information with parents. It's not as automatic as it was in high school, where parents are notified about updates for the students. The students have to give their written consent to our department in order for us to share information, and that is at the discretion of the student. Okay, so what kinds of academic barriers do we work with? What do you see very often? The answer to that is the list keeps on growing. This is a sample list of some of the disabilities that we work with. It's certainly not comprehensive of everything, but you'll see there are some disabilities that we maybe can see, or like a student with a wheelchair. There's certain disabilities that are psychological, like ADHD, LD, learning disability, or dyslexia. And there's also students with medical conditions like HIV, cancer, narcolepsy, anorexia, allergies. So the list of academic barriers, disorders that we work with is extensive. All right. The other thing I want to talk to you about is accommodations. How accommodations are established and assessed in college is going to look different than what you're probably used to in the high school setting. So in high school, the team comes together to talk about the student, to talk about their progress, to make goals, right? Is probably something that you're very used to. And I'm not going to play the sound because I'm sure there's many people out there who know exactly what's going on in these situations. But this is what high school looks like, right? The K through 12 situation. The team comes together to the table to discuss the student and to make plans for their success. That is not how things work at the post-secondary level. The scene that you're looking at right now is a scene between a student and a professor talking about her accommodations. Disability Services does not go to professors in their office and establish accommodations for the students. No, the students have to be able to self-advocate for themselves and be comfortable enough to share their list of accommodations with the professor. So that is how it is. Accommodations, how are they even determined? During the third part of the meeting, as I said, that we have this conversation and we talk about the documentation and your history and everything. We talk about limitations, what accommodations made you successful in the past, what do you think you might need in college, but we also review the documentation that you provide. That is why it is step 2, right? For disabilities that impact learning, as I was saying, ADHD, LD, dyslexia, maybe a psychological disorder, an evaluation is typically going to be required because those are disorders that we can't physically see and assess. So if you come to Disability Services, you can start off by giving us the most recent copy of your IEP or 504 plan, right? So while we work on getting any other documentation to establish permanent accommodations, we can give you these 4 provisional accommodations to work with. Okay, so they are: number 1, priority registration. Number 2, the ability to audio record class lectures. Again, this is a great way to double check your notes for those lecture-based classes. Third one, extended time on tests. We usually start with time and a half on tests, and then testing in our quiet room if you so choose. Disability Services does have its own testing center that students can choose whether or not to use for a quiet space to take their test, but it is certainly not required. In high school, a lot of high school students, maybe during test time, that someone would go to the classroom, pull out the student, give them extra time on tests, and make sure that they're in a quiet room while they're testing, right? That's not how it works in college. We're not going to go to their classes and pull them out for a test. They have to choose where they're going to be taking their test. They are certainly welcome to stay in the classroom if that's where they are comfortable. Okay, so why is an evaluation needed? Okay, provisional accommodations, the 4 that I mentioned, right? They are a quick response to the needs of students, but can miss the most effective accommodations. Registering with Disability Services is an ongoing process, right? You can register anytime you're ready, anytime you feel comfortable, right? So if you were coming to my office to register today, we would establish those 4 provisional accommodations so you have something to work with in your classes, right? But it's certainly, accommodations are not a one-size-fits-all program, right? That's why we need the psychological evaluation to tailor the accommodations to the student so that they can be successful. And we also provide the accommodations, the provisional accommodations, for 1 semester, so new students, have some time to work on scheduling and obtaining a psychological evaluation if it's needed. In terms of getting yourself a new psychological evaluation if it's needed, there are 3 options. Number 1, you can find a psychologist in the community. I have met parents that want to use a certain doctor because 10 years ago, that's the doctor that evaluated the student, and they want the same doctor to evaluate them. That is just fine. Number 2, the Regents Center for Learning Disorder. And I'm going to click on this one and share it with you. So whatever documentation that you send to us, we are going to share with these folks over at the Regents Center for Learning Disorder for their review and approval. We have to obtain their review and approval to establish permanent accommodations. And just so you know, quick side note, they have a program for students coming into college, right? They will meet with you over Zoom. There's the number right there. They will meet with you over Zoom, and you can share your documentation with them, and they will give you feedback on whether or not the documentation warrants certain accommodations. So if there's something specific you're looking for, like double time on tests or something, you might want to share that information with them so you can get quick feedback on whether or not it's going to get approved or not. So I always recommend new students to take advantage of this program, right? And then they'll also give you some tips on what college is going to look like for the students. So that's the number right there. Give them a call, and there's the website. It'll be in the PowerPoint. The other option in terms of getting yourself a psychological evaluation is through Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation. If you qualify for their services, they will do it for free. So it's worth again, seeking their services if you need them. Okay, so please remember, in terms of accommodations can also be medical. Say for the diabetes, cancer, epilepsy, narcolepsy. Obviously, we're not going to need a psychological evaluation for those kinds of medical conditions, but we will need information from the doctor. Also, disability services can provide temporary accommodations. Anyone can fall down, break their hand, and not be able to take notes in the class, you know? We also get a lot of students that were in car accidents and need concussions, you know? Temporary, again, we need the doctor's information about the physical barrier so we can establish accommodations, but just know, I mean, any medical condition, whether it's temporary or permanent, we can set up some accommodations. Also, we work with Title IX for women who are pregnant. Obviously, they don't have a disability, but they are eligible for accommodations under Title IX. In terms of what does disability services do to help new students get accustomed to college and be successful in their surroundings? Okay, what we do is this first year foundation, which is a summer workshop where we bring all the new students together. We talk about accommodations. We talk about what their responsibilities are going to be in college, and other resources on campus that will also be beneficial to them. We used to have a 10-month peer mentors program, but it's been suspended because of the pandemic, so hopefully we can get back to that soon. But that's another program that we have to help new students be successful in college. But we're not necessarily connected to counseling or to money management. Or if you have a question about financial aid, disability services is not going to be able to answer that question for you. You have to go to that department and ask your questions. So there's a lot of great resources available to all students, whether or not they have a disability. It's the student's choice to take advantage of what's being offered. And a little bit of contact information about disability services, right? Our director is Mr. Thomas McCoy over in the Gainesville office. In Dahlonega, it's Dr. Candace Hill. In the Oconee campus, and I also do the online campus, me, Rachel Pinder. In Gainesville, it's Joseph Funderburk. And in Cumming, it is Tracy Hurd. So you'll see that almost on every campus, there is a disability services office. If you're going to the Blue Ridge campus, the director, Thomas McCoy, is the contact for that information. So if, like I said, we all work together, we're all on the same team. It doesn't matter which campus you want to register at, the intake packet and the registration process is the same. And that is the end of our presentation.